I was going through her closet last week. 3 years since she passed, and I still haven't finished. I pulled out this old sweater, green, the one she wore when we'd sit on the porch, and I just held it for an hour. 62 years. That's how long we were married. People hear that number and they assume we had some secret, some formula. They think we never raised our voices or slammed doors or went to bed furious. They're wrong. We fought. Hard sometimes. And here's what nobody wants to hear. That's exactly why we lasted. Not despite the fights. Because of them. If you're married or planning to be or wondering why yours is falling apart, stay with me. I'm going to tell you the 5 times you absolutely should not stay quiet. The 5 hills worth dying on. Because silence didn't save marriages in my generation, and it won't save yours. Growing up, I watched my parents. 41 years they were married, and in all those years, I never once heard them raise their voices at each other. Not once. I thought that was love. I thought that was the goal. But here's what I didn't see back then. I didn't see how my mother would go quiet for days. How my father would retreat to his workshop for hours. How they could sit in the same room and be 1,000 miles apart. They weren't at peace. They were just careful. Careful people living careful lives, never touching anything that might break. So when I married Eleanor, I decided I would be the easy husband, the one who doesn't make waves, the one who says whatever you want, dear, and means it as a gift. 3 years in, she wanted to move closer to her mother. I didn't. Her mother was a difficult woman, and I knew it would strain us. But I swallowed it, smiled, said, if that's what makes you happy. I'll never forget her face. She didn't look relieved. She looked alone, like I'd just told her she was on her own with this decision, this life, this marriage. That's when I understood something that took my parents 41 years to never learn. Silence isn't peace. It's abandonment wearing a polite mask. And my wife didn't marry me to be alone. Now let me tell you about the 5 times you should never stay quiet. These aren't theories. These are scars I carry. Lessons I learned the hard way, so maybe you don't have to. The first time you should fight is when they're about to make a mistake. The hardest thing in marriage isn't criticism. It's watching someone you love walk straight toward a cliff and saying nothing because you want to be supportive. Eleanor's sister Margaret came to us in year 12, needed money, a lot of it. Eleanor wanted to help. That's who she was, generous to a fault with family. But I knew Margaret. I'd watched her burn through 2 inheritances, watched her make promises she never kept. I saw exactly where this was going. And I said nothing. I wanted to be the supportive husband, the one who trusts his wife's judgment. So I signed the check and smiled. 8 months later, Margaret disappeared. The money was gone, and Eleanor was devastated. But here's what broke me. It wasn't the money that hurt her. It was the silence. She looked at me and said, "You knew, didn't you? You knew and you didn't tell me." I failed her by keeping quiet. Love isn't cheerleading. Love is truth-telling when the truth costs you something. The second time you should fight is when your needs are being ignored. There's a slow death in marriage. It happens when one person shrinks themselves day after day to keep the peace. I'm a quiet man, always have been. I need solitude, the way some people need air. But Eleanor was a connector. She loved people, loved gatherings, loved filling our weekends with dinners and obligations and plans. For years, I said yes. Yes to her sister's birthday. Yes to the neighborhood barbecue. Yes to hosting Thanksgiving again. I told myself I was being a good husband, but inside, I was disappearing. And the worst part, I started resenting her. Not for the plans, for my own cowardice. For never once saying, I need a weekend with nothing, just nothing. When I finally exploded, it was ugly. 15 years of swallowed needs came pouring out in one terrible evening. But you know what came after the storm? Understanding, real understanding. She had no idea. She thought I enjoyed it all because I never said otherwise. Resentment is a debt that collects interest. You pay it early or it bankrupts you. The third time you should fight is when values, not preferences, are at stake. Preferences are negotiable. Beach or mountains for vacation. Italian or Chinese for dinner. These things don't matter. You compromise, you move on. But values? Values are the bedrock. And when they're threatened, you cannot stay silent. Eleanor came from a family where criticism was called honesty. Her father would tear into the children at dinner, mocking their failures, and call it toughening them up. When we had our own kids, I saw it creeping in. Little comments, sharp corrections. The belief that shame builds character. I didn't see parenting styles. I saw the kind of people we were shaping, the kind of home we were building. And I knew if I stayed quiet, I would lose something that couldn't be recovered. We fought about this for years, real fights, hard conversations that left us both exhausted. But those conversations shaped our children more than any single decision we ever made. Some fights aren't about winning, they're about defining who you are together. The fourth time you should fight is when you're being disrespected, especially in private. People think the danger is public humiliation, someone embarrassing you at a party. That's not where marriages erode. The real damage happens in the small moments no one else sees. There was a period, around year 20, when Eleanor started making cutting remarks about my career, which wasn't as successful as her brother's, about my family, who she found exhausting, about my habits, my weight, my quiet nature, always wrapped in a joke, always delivered with a smile, and I let it go. Again and again, I let it go. Until one day I realized something terrifying. I didn't like who I was becoming around her. I was smaller, defensive, waiting for the next jab. The fight that followed was our worst. Voices raised, tears shed, words we couldn't take back. But it was also our most important fight, because she didn't know. She genuinely didn't know how those jokes landed. To her, it was playful. To me, it was erosion. People can't respect what you don't defend, not even the people who love you most. The fifth time you should fight is when you're growing apart and nobody's saying it. This is the silent killer, the marriage that looks fine from the outside while both people are slowly becoming strangers. Year 38. The kids were gone. The house was quiet, and we sat at dinner one night with nothing to say. Not angry, not unhappy, just absent. Two people who had forgotten why they were sitting at the same table. I watched her butter her bread and I thought, I don't know this woman anymore, and she doesn't know me. Most people would have let that moment pass, finished dinner, turned on the television, drifted further apart, but something in me refused. I set down my fork and said, Eleanor, I don't know who we are anymore. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, I've been waiting for you to say that. That conversation, that painful, terrifying, necessary conversation, led to the richest years of our marriage. We traveled to places we'd postponed for decades. We had discussions we'd been avoiding for years. We found an intimacy we'd forgotten existed. The most important fight isn't against your partner, it's against the slow drift into roommates. Now I need you to understand something. When I say fight, I don't mean screaming. I don't mean cruelty or contempt or trying to wound the person you love. Fighting is refusing to pretend. It's saying the hard thing when staying silent would be easier. It's choosing discomfort over distance. Every real fight is a declaration. It says, this relationship matters enough for me to be uncomfortable. You matter enough for me to risk your anger. We matter enough to get this right. The couples who never fight, they aren't more in love. They've stopped trying. They've decided the marriage isn't worth the effort of honesty anymore. And that's not peace. That's surrender. In Eleanor's last year, when the diagnosis had settled in and we both knew what was coming, she took my hand one evening and said something I'll carry until I join her. She said, "Thank you for never giving up on us, even when giving up would have been easier. 62 years, hundreds of fights, thousands of hard conversations, and in the end, she wasn't grateful for the easy times. She was grateful that I loved her enough to stay in the ring. The fight was never the enemy of our love. Indifference was. Indifference is what kills a marriage. Not conflict, not hard conversations, not the willingness to say, this isn't working and we need to fix it. Indifference, the slow shrug, the quiet retreat, the decision that it's just not worth it anymore. That's what you should fear, not the fight. So let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, even if it's just to yourself. What are you holding back right now? What truth are you swallowing to keep the peace? What conversation have you been avoiding for months, maybe years? Ask yourself why. The real question isn't, will this cause conflict? The real question is, what will my silence cost us in 5 years, in 10, in 30? Time is shorter than you think. I know you don't believe that. I didn't either when I was your age. But one day, you'll blink and realize decades have passed. And the words you didn't say, they'll weigh more than the ones you did. I still have that green sweater. Some nights I hold it and I think about all our fights, the slammed doors, the tearful conversations at the kitchen table, the long walks we took to cool down before we said something unforgivable. And you know what I feel? Gratitude. Because every single fight meant we still believed in each other. Every hard conversation meant we hadn't given up. Every uncomfortable truth meant we were still choosing this marriage, this life, this person. I'd rather have 62 years of fighting for something real than a lifetime of peaceful nothing. Eleanor's been gone 3 years now. The house is quiet, but our love was loud, and I wouldn't trade a single fight for silence, not one. If this meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's a friend whose marriage is fading into politeness. Maybe it's someone who's been swallowing their truth for too long. The clock is ticking for all of us. Say the thing, have the fight, love loud enough to be heard.